We, of course, a couple of weeks ago talked about the first two episodes that recently premiered. The Mandalorian has been away for about 2.5 years now and has come back with season three on Disney Plus. I think both of us pretty much enjoyed the first two episodes as a setup, as a way to just
Hmm.
reintroduce us to the characters. We talked a lot about just the structure of the show and where they were heading and just the changes in the formula. And I gotta say, I think these two recent episodes certainly changed the status quo up quite a lot with the Mandalorian and
Yeah.
what we were used to. But before we talk about the details and before we get into spoilers and talk more in depth about episodes three and four of The Mandalorian, just generally, what were your big picture thoughts and overall feelings about what we recently saw out of this series?
Man, I like these past two episodes, man. You know, you said they switch up the formula a little bit. It's not always for the better in every TV show just because they switch up a formula. You know, I want to make that known. But a lot of times there is something to it. And if you have a reason for it, it usually works well. And I think it works well here. I think what they're trying to do in telling these stories is important. And I think it switches up things for the better, man. I enjoyed them. And it's kind of cool, I think, coming into this. Like you said, those first two episodes did feel like setup, you know what I'm saying? Bo-Katan got her helmet on, and everything's going on. And so now we're here in a place where it's like, okay, what else does Star Wars have to give us that's going to shake it up a little bit? And thankfully, chapter 19, episode 3 of the season shakes it up and gives us a look into something not so bright, or that can be scary. I think for the Star Wars universe, an examination. I think that's one of my favorite things with Andor, with now this episode 19 of or chapter 19 of The Mandalorian is examining the powers at play, and is everybody really as good as they say they are? And that's like been like one of my favorite things again to explore with these last couple Star Wars projects, man. And we get that here. There's also some stuff in chapter 20 I really really like that we'll also get to, but I think that's another really cool episode that explains yeah, what Grogu was going through, man. So yeah, two episodes that I enjoyed. I was happy to watch both of them. One random thing that I'll add that I'm sure I've talked about a lot of times, Ludwig Göransson, man. Something about this damn Mandalorian theme that every time I hear it, it becomes more and more my favorite. Like, you know, like when we used to watch TV shows and we are always excited to hear the opening of a show, that doesn't happen a lot anymore. We don't get a lot of superheroes that, you know what I'm saying? We don't get a lot of those anymore. But something about the opening of the Mandalorian, the bum bum bum, that is just, I don't know. It makes me feel like, oh shoot, my weekly show is on. And a lot of shows haven't done that recently, man. So I appreciate that as well.
It doesn't help that every streaming platform encourages you to skip intros and skip themes and skip credits. I hate that shit. Listen
That's
to this
true.
stuff. It's great music. But overall, with these two episodes, I really liked episode three just because of how different it was, just changing up the
Mm-hmm.
pace and doing something that is still yet to be revealed. There's a lot to still find out about just the direction and how it's going to impact everything that they're trying to do with this season. Episode four, which reverted back to what we've been accustomed to, I wasn't as much of a fan of. There are some things in it that I liked and that I enjoyed. I did find that the momentum of just the whole series up until this point, especially with season three, just seems to be in a bit of a weird place. Like we're four
Mm-hmm.
episodes in, which means we're halfway through this first season. That The Mandalorian notoriously does not have a lot of episodes, and the episodes are not that
That's
long.
true.
It's a very straightforward adventure. And now we're halfway through this series, and I'm just wondering, okay, what's really the point of this story? Like there are certain
Mm-hmm.
beats that we've tapped into, certain things that we're exploring and touching upon, and maybe revisiting every episode. But I don't get the feeling necessarily that there's an overarching or a looming presence or a looming threat or a bigger story at play necessarily. It feels almost a little mundane at times, and I'm just kind of
Mm.
wondering like, well, what are we doing here? Like, where's the narrative thrust? Where's the forward momentum? And so I think that now with episode four, my patience is kind of wearing a little bit thin. That could all be
Okay.
restored with episode five. They could totally win me back. That is very possible. This series has done that before, and I've been vocal about how sometimes certain episodes they just don't feel
Mm-hmm.
like they go anywhere or do anything, and I'm just like, okay, we're just doing another rescue mission again. But they could again, they can rectify that very soon here. We'll just have to wait and see with the remaining four episodes that we'll get. But let's get into the nitty gritty. Let's talk about spoilers. If you've not seen episodes three and four, or even episodes one and two of season three of The Mandalorian, this is your official spoiler warning. Go watch that stuff and come back and listen to the rest of our conversation. Before we talk about the actual events of these episodes, though, I do want to bring something
Yeah.
up. And it's the fact that apparently viewership for season 3 is lower than it's ever been compared to previous Mandalorian seasons. And most notably, Samba TV, which tracks the viewership amongst a certain amount of households. I think that they track viewership in 25 million households. They utilize all the smart TV technology to track, who's watching what, how long they watched it. They just recently published data, and they estimated that the season 3 premiere of The Mandalorian was just watched by under 1.5 million households. Again, it's important to note this is not the complete story. This is just one source. There are many different rating sources that pull watch time and viewership, but this is one source that's pulling these numbers, Samba TV. So 1.5 million households watched the season premiere.
Mm.
The Book of Boba Fett had 2% higher viewership. They just had over 1.5 million viewers, but Obi-Wan Kenobi almost smashed the premiere of the season 3 premiere of The Mandalorian. The premiere of Obi-Wan Kenobi had 2.14 million households watch that premiere. So things are trending down for Star Wars series so far. What do you think about that? And have you noticed that The Mandalorian doesn't necessarily seem as much of appointment viewing as it maybe used to? Because it kind of feels like, I don't know if you feel this way, but it kind of feels like it's getting lost in the conversation. It doesn't feel like the biggest thing right now. Because I think in previous seasons, The Mandalorian felt like a phenomenon. It felt like everybody was talking about it. Everybody was watching it. People were staying up till ridiculous hours in the morning to watch it when it premiered, and they were making their recap videos 20 minutes later. It doesn't necessarily feel like that anymore. Or am I just tripping and people are just, maybe catching up with it later?
No, it definitely feels like that. It could be for, any X number of reasons. One, I wonder if people specifically like super mega Star Wars fans, right? I wonder if they're feeling any kind of maybe like baby Grogu fatigue, right? Young Grogu fatigue, where they just feel like it's just Mando and Grogu on adventures. Maybe a lot of people are tired of that. Because that is still what the show is, right? It really is still them on their adventures, but I wonder if that has anything to do with, again, just how often we're seeing that. Of course, Obi-Wan is going to have a crazy opening. Ewan McGregor as the character is, way more notorious than the Mandalorian ever was. But I think that is an important indicator of what people are interested in as well when it comes to these things. And I'm curious is what I'm curious of is, of course, outside of Andor did this so well, right? But I wonder if there's now like I don't know, a feeling. I wonder if people are missing the Jedi. That's what I wonder. I wonder if that's a thing. Like, I wonder is because, of course, there's a lot of our favorites, right? There's a lot of the reason why I can't wait to see a Jedi at the time. It just is what it is. That's part of the reason. Or a Sith, you know what I mean? Or a Sith. And Mando, we know we're really not going to get that a lot. And I can imagine, again, a Star Wars fan who is waiting for those things and you don't get it. Of course, again, there's more stories to be told outside of Jedi and Sith and all that. But I think there could also be fatigue there. I think there could also be like, all right, what else? That's one of the things that can put the fuel in some engine. Like, oh, shoot, there goes a Jedi. Let's hop back on this thing and watch it. And so I'm wondering if we're losing that a little bit in every Mando episode that comes out. It's like, oh, man. And I think, to your point of the show kind of, I think, losing, maybe a little bit of steam for you and not enough what's going on. I think that could be part of it too. Like, what is the thing? What's at stake right now? You know what I'm saying? What are we chasing in terms of a story arc, a character arc in this season of The Mandalorian? I wonder if people see that and are uninterested in that. Not only that, I think it's also hard to talk about Mandalorian in the conversation with all of the other great shows we've been talking about recently. I think it is. It's a very difficult thing to do. We can love The Mandalorian, but there's The Last of Us. You know what I'm saying? Like, we can love The Mandalorian, but the hold The Last of Us has on people, the hold that what's another good show we want? The hold that Succession even is gonna have on people. You know what I'm saying? It's just very interesting. I think The Mandalorian, is filling a weird landscape there that I don't know if it can necessarily compete, because it's not bringing home the gold every week in the show. It's not making it feel like required viewing every week. And I think that could be a difference.
It's also important to know that at the time of the premiere of The Mandalorian and even season two, it was the only game in town for Disney Plus. There were no other shows on Disney Plus. Even by the time we got Mandalorian season two, Marvel had not even started rolling out their shows yet. WandaVision premiered like weeks after season two. And so season one of The Mandalorian launched with Disney Plus. It made a big splash. Like that was their flagship show. Season two comes back and everybody realizes, that Baby Grogu, Baby Yoda is a thing. And so I think that certainly drew a lot of attention. But now, you've had the Book of Boba Fett, you've had Obi-Wan Kenobi, you've had Andor, you've had the Bad Batch, you had all these other things that have come out from Star Wars. It's not the only game in town anymore. So people are probably just tapping into other stuff too, not only within just the zeitgeist of television with like The Last of Us or Succession or whatever, but also just on the actual platform, Disney Plus. There's just other offerings and other options. And so it might have just lost a little bit of the attention and some of the appeal because people maybe have watched some of those other shows like an Andor. Maybe that wasn't their flavor. Maybe the Book of Boba Fett wasn't for them and they didn't like it. And maybe now the Mandalorian, it's like, oh, I'm just kind of over it. Maybe I'll just wait, and maybe I'll just wait until all 8 episodes drop and I'll watch it all together. I think there's a lot of different factors at play. So we'll have to see how that continues to shake out. Let's talk about some of these episodes though. Episode 3 of season 3, super different than anything they've ever done before. Yeah. Not only is it the longest episode to date, like ever, clocking in at 59 minutes, which I didn't know that. Very much surprised because they don't do that with a lot of these Disney Plus shows, especially The Mandalorian. But it also takes a huge pivot within the second act in the middle of this episode. We spend about a good 40, probably 47, 48 minutes not following our main characters, not following Din Djarin or Grogu or Bo-Katan. We actually go to Coruscant, and we're following 2 characters that we have been introduced to before, Dr. Pin Pershing and Elia Khan, 2 former workers, I guess, of Moff Gideon, who was the big villain of seasons 1 and season 2, played by Giancarlo Esposito. And now they're both sort of on a path to redemption. They're both trying to mend their past and find a new direction and do something a little bit different. But this was just a big change and departure than everything we've seen out of The Mandalorian thus far. And I think it's caused a lot of conversation among Star Wars fans. It's currently now the lowest rated episode on IMDb, probably due to the fact, just due to the fact that we're not doing our same regular adventures of Grogu and Din Djarin. And just the fact that the pacing also, in addition to that, is so different. It's much more political. It's much more intentional. It's not the fun adventure, the fun samurai Western style that they've utilized so much in this series. Just what do you overall think about just this change of pace and how they, sort of integrated the world of Coruscant again, which we haven't seen in a while, I think, in the Star Wars universe, which was so integral to the prequel trilogy, but also how this story is now connecting what it seems like is the original trilogy, but also now the sequel trilogy that we just recently finished up with The Last Jedi, The Rise of Skywalker, The Force Awakens. There seems to be a lot of connective tissue there. What did you think about just the events of everything that happened with those 2 characters returning?
I think it's such an interesting study. As I said in the kind of my general thoughts segment, man. And I think, again, it's what are people looking for in Star Wars and what interests them and what stories haven't been told that can add some value, I think, to this world in Star Wars. There's so much happening in Star Wars all the time. But the way this episode plays out, man, I enjoyed it. It's something about the examination of, I think, the New Republic that we've never seen before, I've never thought about until this episode happened. And I was like, oh, shoot, that got me thinking. You know what I'm saying? And I think for me, again, as a Star Wars fan who just loves stories, you just tell me a good story and have it have some meaning. And I'm like, okay, I'm pretty satisfied with that. And to me, that's what this episode did, man. I think, Katie O'Brien and Omid Abati were, they took this episode and they decided to kind of, you even said they kind of took a book out of Andor here, and it's because they talk about the real. A lot of times in Star Wars land, we like to live in the fantasy and not the political, although sometimes the political to me can be just as interesting if done right. Sometimes the political, don't get me wrong, sometimes Star Wars, the political, all right, y'all, what are we doing here? What are we talking about? But there are other times where we're like, no, this services the story in such a meaningful way. And here, this whole episode for me is like, maybe is really saying maybe the New Republic isn't as good as they set out to be, or they're not as high on the morality scale, or not as different from the Empire as it looks on the surface of things. And I love that. To me, that is an examination of something that seems important and interesting, and like you said, ties up a lot of the things happening between the previous trilogy, or the prequel trilogy, and the new trilogy that we've gotten, and or the original trilogy, sorry, the original trilogy and the new trilogy that we've gotten. And so I think yeah, I just enjoyed everything, I think, going down. I thought the performances were really good. I love the pacing. I love how patient it was. I love how there's little moments where the character Penn, Professor Dr. Pershing, whatever you call him, there's just so many moments where he has to question where his loyalty should lie. And I think, to me, that's cool. That's a nuance that like is enough for me to make the episode interesting, because it's hard to trust when you're in this new environment, in this new place, and you're like, oh, can I touch that thing? And they're like, oh no, you can't touch that thing, brother. I'm sorry. It's like, dang, I thought this is supposed to be utopia. Why can't I touch it? You know what I'm saying? So yeah, of course, a big part of the episode is him trying to continue his research, which has to do with cloning. But of course, the New Republic is like, cloning, that's what Palpatine used to for Order 66. You know what I mean? All these other things. And so it's also interesting because I can understand New Republic being like, hell no, you can't continue no cloning. But then there's another part of me, right, where you're watching it and you're like, but he could literally save lives. And so that's why it's an interesting conversation, because I can see both sides. One, and two, I can also see why the New Republic can seem a little empire-y when it comes to keeping these new members, I guess, of their community in check with their parole officers. I can see why all of these things are happening. And so, yeah, man, I enjoyed the episode for what it was. I appreciate all the things that we're talking about, because now it gave me a new lens on the way to look at the New Republic. And to me, that's a successful episode.
Yeah, beyond them seemingly trying to fix the sequel trilogy, which I feel a way about that, because I think that they know that's just not a beloved trilogy of movies, and they're kind of doing what they can to mend that fence and try to make it richer and extrapolate a little bit more out of that. This was really interesting stuff, because you have a guy in Dr. Pershing trying to find his place in this new world. He doesn't really know his purpose. He's trying to continue his research, but also everybody around him is looking at him crazy, looking at him sideways, judging him based off of his past. And he's really somebody that was mostly following orders and is very passionate about his research too. But this is now in a new world in which people just look down on his work and they're not totally on board with it. But at the same time, the Elia Kane character, played by Katie O'Brien, comes off as somebody who's warm and comforting and can relate to him. And they're walking around Coruscant and just, having casual conversation. It's just a lot of walking and talking in this episode, just getting to know these people and seeing their relationship develop, because the betrayal that she ultimately has at the end of him and turning him over to the New Republic, it's supposed to be gut wrenching, and it's supposed to bring to light those morality and those feelings of just like that moral gray area that everybody exists in. Like you said, everybody isn't necessarily as good as they seem. They're not as heroic as they might have initially been presented to be. And how can they be? There's no way to have that be a reality in a world where war is almost always constant. There's rarely peacetime in the universe of Star Wars. And when there's war at play, people are making very difficult, dark, tough decisions that ultimately are probably sacrificing lives, and doing so at just, sort of at the expense of other people, and people do become expendable in that process. And so just to see that whole relationship unfold, we don't know how it's going to play necessarily into the events of the entire season, but The Mandalorian has started to open up and unlock this idea of cloning more and more as we've progressed throughout the series. They touched upon it for certain in season 2, I remember, but now it seems like it's going to be even more of a thing as we progress here. But I'm very interested to see like where it all might go, and how we might also see Elia Kane and Dr. Pershing come back into the fold here. With Chapter 20 and the Foundling, we do spend a lot more time back with Grogu, back with Din Djarin, and back with Bo-Katan, because one of the big things that does happen in Chapter 19 that sort of bookends the episode is the fact that Din Djarin and Bo-Katan are able to be redeemed. You know, they're able to go to the
Mm-hmm.
Mandalorian people, to this tribe of people, and convince them, like, hey, we saw the minds of Mandalore. We were able to redeem ourselves. Din Djarin is redeemed, and also Bo-Katan is accepted into the clan as well. And so once we get to chapter 20, we see them training. We see Grogu also training, trying to use his Jedi, tricks that he's probably picked up from Luke over the past couple of years, and he's a little intimidated. He's not ready to really like tap into that yet. He needs that pep talk from Din Djarin, but we get to see, just sort of that time spent with them to see like how they're adjusting to life here, being accepted back into the ranks of the Mandalorian sort of hunting party that's all throughout this episode. What did you think about just the fact that Bo-Katan, who sort of not really had a place all the way up until this point, has found her
Mm-hmm.
place alongside Din Djarin, and we're seeing them, sort of exist alongside each other, but there's also still, I think, an element of hesitation on her part where she isn't fully ready to accept the ways of these people and ready to really ingratiate herself into what they're doing.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting arc. I love any redemption story, but I really like this, you really just said it, this unwillingness, I think, or she's just, Bo-Katan is not all the way in right now. And I love that conflict in her. I think in that, especially as someone who comes from royalty, who's like, ooh, I don't know if I want to be that again. I don't know if I want to be deep into this thing. And what I also love is what's the name of the lady again who does the armor for the Mandalorians? I always forget her name. I don't know
I
why.
do too.
But I love, she has this thing where she says to Bo-Katan, I mean, you've also bathed in the waters. You're already here. Just keep your helmet on if you want, and you can still leave when you want to. And I love that it's such an open-ended choice for Bo-Katan, because it really is now in that puts the ball in Bo-Katan's court completely. It's like, okay, if you're gonna do it, if you're gonna leave now, you probably aren't ever coming back, kind of type thing. Versus if you're staying, you're probably really staying. So I kind of love this conflict that she's in currently, because it allows me to watch her. But then there's moments where you're like, you're really liking this Bo-Katan, aren't you? You know what I mean? Like the audience says that. I know it because, when she's asking for, she's getting her arm plates done, and she is looking for the mythosaur to be on one of her shoulders. And I just think it's cool that they're exploring, I think, her character in this way, because it gives her all the autonomy. So I like what Bo-Katan kind of has going on right now, I think.
Yeah, I think the character's name is just the Armorer. She doesn't have like a
Just
name,
armor.
just the
Oh, okay.
Armorer. But Bo-Katan's getting a lot to do here. Katie Sackhoff is doing a really, really good job. I think some people are feeling a little bit like, hey, isn't this show about the Mandalorian? Why are y'all pulling a Book of Boba Fett on us and all of a sudden switching gears? But I do think that this is ultimately going to be really, really something of service to the story that we are telling with Din Djarin, because we can sort of step outside of everything we've known about him, because his ultimate goal has been to be redeemed after everything that he's been through, and is to protect Grogu. We're seeing all of that
Mm-hmm.
stuff happen, so I think that that's still moving forward. But Bo-Katan having her own agency, her own arc, is really, really important here as well. They are doing a lot of just more regular stuff. We're just kind of watching them just train and stuff. It's always cute to see Grogu just try to unlock those powers and realize his potential at such a young age, and it's really funny to see him just do that crazy Yoda flip all of a sudden and then shoot him up real quick with the three paintball pellets. That was nice and fun. But overall, Bo-Katan, I think, is playing a really, really integral part here. But speaking of Grogu, one of the big pieces of chapter 20, episode 4 here is this flashback that we get while Grogu is, sort of watching this armor be put together by the armorer. It's going to be this protective piece, sort of bringing him again into the fold. He has a flashback of his escape from Order 66. And I know that this has been a conversation point really ever since the start of The Mandalorian. How did Grogu escape? He is a Jedi at the end of the day, or at least becoming a Jedi, now as a Jedi. How did he escape Order 66? They obviously were able to identify people that were Force sensitive and people that were training, the Jedi arts. How did Grogu all of a sudden get out of, just everything that was happening with that perilous event, which impacted the entire galaxy and almost wiped out the Jedi completely? And so we got a lot of that in this episode. Really, the whole sequence in the middle takes place as a flashback, and we see him on Coruscant, and we find out that he's rescued by a Jedi called Master Kelleran Beck, which is played by the same actor who famously voiced Jar Jar Binks in the prequel trilogy, probably the most detested Star Wars character here. So talk about redemption. He's coming back for a moment of redemption here. But Kelleran Beck is the one that rescued Grogu from the Jedi Temple on Coruscant during the events of Order 66, played by Ahmad Best. What did you think about this whole sequence and how it just, sort of went down, and just the fact that we finally got a little bit of a look into just everything that happened with Order 66 and where Grogu was during that particular time?
Man, shout out to Keller and Beck or my best for I think he's even spoken about this recently, but this character has kind of recontextualized him in the eyes of a lot of Star Wars fans, man. A lot of Star Wars fans do not mess with Jar Jar Binks. In fact, he went on to play Jar Jar Binks even in animated Clone Wars and things like that whenever he appeared. So again, people still had their reservations about him, but really, only recently, a couple years ago, where they kind of had that Legend of the Temple type Star Wars show or whatever, in which he kind of came back and people were like, oh man, we like this guy. And then he's like, oh, I'm the same guy. Surprise. And was like, oh shoot. Okay. So he's kind of been, again, just a changing force. I think people are really starting to like him now that he has been Kelleran Beck versus Jar Jar Binks here. And of course I have to agree, to some form. Kelleran Beck, man, is a beast, right? He's one of the only Jedi that's like, I think they say is like really committed to teaching younglings. I know a lot of them is always like multiple things that they do, multiple hats that they wear as Jedi, but this dude is a teacher first and foremost, man. They call him the Sabered Hand, and he's just a really cool character, I think, for them to show in the Mandalorian. Again, funny, they literally made this character up for like a Jedi Legend of the Hidden Temple type show, and here we are bringing them into a whole episode of The Mandalorian. I think it's just really cool thing that they're doing here, especially certain characters can have really cool lores if you give them cool lores, and I think he fits right in, man. He feels dope. They give him another saber to play with in the episode. I'm like, this is a black Jedi with two lightsabers. I was on board seeing that stuff, man. Just because I think it's cool. And I am interested in what happened to Grogu during Order 66, right? I think we'll see more of what's to come, or how the hell they get Grogu out of there, where Aunt Grogu ends up, and all of these things. But I think using Kelleran Beck as a device, or as one of the main Jedi to help get Grogu out is a pretty cool thing in my eyes.
It's also nice that Grogu isn't just like the cute, cuddly, wuddly device in the show. Like, there's actual story to Grogu. There is more to the character. Like, this is going to be eventually at some point, probably well past the time we're alive on this earth, where Grogu grows up and becomes like, of age and can start to speak and not babble all the time. But I also love when Order 66 really gets expanded upon, and we get to see all angles of it, because admittedly in episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, it's like a 7-minute sequence. It's effective, it's good, but it's also like, well, there's a lot of Jedi in the universe at that particular time. That was like the height of the Jedi almost. Yeah. Like, this has to have more widespread ramifications. Can we see that stuff? So I love that we get this moment here. I love how they tapped into it with Obi-Wan Kenobi in those opening episodes, or even Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. That was a big piece of like the opening moments of that video game, seeing just like the fallout from Order 66. And so anytime we can revisit that, which is, sort of the main central focal point of everything that happened before and everything that happened after, is always super entertaining. And then, of course, on Coruscant, which, again, has played a really, really important role in these past 2 episodes, in both episodes 3 and episodes 4. We spent a lot of time on Coruscant, and I didn't realize like how much I kind of missed being in that place. Like, we don't see it that much all that often, because I think it received a lot of criticism in the prequel trilogy. Like, oh, they just created this big CGI city. Like, it doesn't have any character. It's not, it's not a place that feels like Star Wars. But now, revisiting it almost kind of feels like home to a certain extent. It almost feels like safe and familiar. A lot of the Clone Wars TV show took place on Coruscant, and it's been brought back up a lot recently. So I just love that stuff. As we close out here, sort of any final thoughts on these past 2 episodes of The Mandalorian? Any hopes for, the final 4 episodes that we get over the next few weeks?
Yeah, I think these first couple episodes, even like you said, even that first 2 definitely felt like, let's get back into it kind of feels, which made them fine episodes. I'm hoping from here on out we do get some of the, I think, big plot points and driving forces to the end of what makes me feel like this season was successful, because although I don't mind any of the episodes that we watched so far, I like all of them for the most part. I am looking for like a something by the end of this to be like, oh no, that season was pretty heat. You know what I mean? Oh no, that season was pretty cool. And I think we've done a lot of that groundwork. I think Bo-Katan is coming to a place where she's going to continue to wear the helmet for a little bit. I think Grogu is being trained for a reason. I think our original Mando Din Djarin is back and redeemed. I think we're at a point in time where our three adventurers that we're following right now can get into some mess, and I'm excited to see what that mess is. And hopefully that's exactly what's coming. So yeah, I'm just looking forward to hopefully a good end of the season and some action to go down.
We haven't seen or heard about Moff Gideon yet.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's possible that Elia Kane is sort of performing an inside mission? You know, she's like a double agent. She's working on behalf of the New Republic, but she's doing so in service of Moff Gideon because the New Republic, I think the last time we saw him was at the end of season 2. He was in their possession, you know, and I think he was going to go to trial, but we don't really know the state of him. Do you think perhaps that the Elia Kane character could perhaps be, you know, sort of working as a double agent to ultimately free him or get him back into the fold of things?
Yeah, absolutely. The way in which she's maneuvering right now definitely feels like something is absolutely wrong with her. Even when all of the officers turn around and she turns up the dial on what is the brainwashing, which they swear is not brainwashing. They try to make it sound all happy and cuddly and things like that. But the way she turns up that dial, man, she's definitely a double agent, almost triple if you think about it. But yeah, she has a lot going on right now. But I put my bets that she's definitely trying to get back to Moff Gideon and get him out of there.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Well, folks, those are our thoughts on the most two recent episodes of The Mandalorian. If you've checked out this series on Disney Plus, definitely hit us up and let us know what you think.